Hello. Today I'm going to be interviewing Luna Morely, also known as Factor5Fanatic, also known as
Hi.
Super Mega Cube. She goes by many different names. Anyways, I'm gonna be interviewing her about her, experience as a independent game developer. So I also have I have 9 different questions, by the way. Is that too many questions, or?
Oh, absolutely not. Go right ahead.
Okay, alright, you're right, okay. So anyways, so what would you say was the catalyst for you, wanting to, get into game development, tell me the story behind that.
Well, ever since I was a really little kid, I always knew I wanted to be in some sort of creative field. Throughout my life, I kind of, especially as a kid, I kind of juggled back and forth between wanting to make video games and wanting to make movies. And ultimately, movies came first because there was a good chunk of my life where my parents didn't want me playing video games, so I didn't have any. Anytime I played video games, it was at a friend's house or at a relative's house. However, one of those times I played Star Wars Rogue Squadron, and I think that was really the tipping point for okay, I want to do this. Because of course you have I must have been 4 or 5 when I played that, and I was already really into Star Wars at that age. And oh, you want to fly these cool ships or whatnot, and here was it was a way to live out that fantasy or whatnot, and that was just so mind-blowing to me as a kid. Just the idea of okay, it's like watching a movie but you control it. That always before I even was able to play video games, that concept always really hooked me. For lack of a better word. And then but yeah, for quite a while I wanted to do both, and I'd say in 4th grade, so this would have been 2004, I downloaded on my parents' computer, without their knowledge, I downloaded one of the really early versions of Game Maker.
Oh.
And I started playing around with it while I was still in elementary school. And of course, in middle school, I ended up buying Dark Basic, which was this early 3D Game Maker. And it was hard for me to use. I haven't used it in a really long time. It was much more Game Maker, even at the time, had the emphasis was on the graphical user interface, whereas here it was code. And judging by the name, I assume coding in BASIC. It's been too long, but effectively what I would do with that would be to look at the example projects and try to get a sense of how the code was structured, and just try to I would often work off of the example projects and try to expand them in different ways. I would have to go back and, well, first of all, I'd have to fix the computer I was doing all that stuff on. It was this ancient mummy, even at the time, a computer. It was designed to run Windows Millennium Edition, everyone's favorite. But yeah, so I would, but yeah, throughout, especially middle school, I was pretty active making games. Literally one game I made was while, I was asked to mow the lawn, but I really didn't want to. So I mowed the lawn for a little bit, then came back inside for a refresher, and ended up spending 30 minutes trying to make a game as fast as possible.
That happens.
Yeah. So, but yeah, none of my early stuff was any good. A lot of it was in hindsight, really bad. And it wasn't until, like, I'd say 2010 or whatnot, or like when I was in high school, where I actually started putting some degree of effort into them. Or at least it's like, okay, no, I've gotten over the novelty of, like, look, I'm playing a game that I myself made. Like, okay, now let me try to make something that's a bit more professional, or like try to make it as much like a real game as possible. And that's kind of how I got rolling, and from there it was just kind of a matter of iteration. And really, that's kind of how I learned what I have learned, is just through iteration. Just like trying stuff out, seeing what works, and also that knowledge of film really served me well, because I already had like some groundwork for knowing what works in like other artistic mediums, and it was kind of like, oh, here are the correlations. Like, film is all about utilizing visuals to communicate, whereas like gameplay, or like with video games, the central hook of the medium is interactivity and how you use that. So from there, I just kind of went from project to project and just evolving my craft, and just basically just learning through that, and of course trial and error.
Yeah. Trial and error. It's quite a factor in a lot of things. You know, you just gotta like keep going at it, just like getting better and better. And what you mentioned about like games being like an interactive movie, like, you know how you like see, like, you know, a big, like, you know, set piece in like a movie or an anime, you know, it's like like a big fight, you know, it's like wow, it's like I want to like you know, be in that set piece or whatnot. And in video games, they kind of like give you an opportunity to experience something similar to that, you know, basically. Yeah. But, like, there's also a trap that you can fall into. Yeah.
And,
like, most definitely.
There's, like, the 7th generation had a lot of games fall into this trap, where it's like, okay, we'll be more like movies or whatnot, we'll make things more cinematic. But, like, in doing so, they missed the point of the medium, where, like, eventually, like, it got to a point where it's like they forgot like the strengths of their own medium. Like, it's not about like probably like in a, like, for instance, it's not just a matter of like how you tell a story or whatnot. It's also just a matter of how you utilize each medium or whatnot. Like, if you like watch Citizen Kane, so much of the emotions and like plot information like aren't just carried through dialogue, but through the visuals. And like there's a lot of really stunning imagery that like really gives insight into like the characters, what's going on. And one time in college, my teacher put on a scene from that movie and put it on mute, and then asked the class, like, okay, what just happened in that scene? Everyone was able to do it.
That's really cool.
Like, that's the sort of, like, so it's not, when looking to other mediums or whatnot for inspiration, it's not just like, oh, I want this to look cooler or whatnot, or give me more prestige or like whatever, but like kind of getting a sense of how other mediums work, and like okay, this is how you would use visuals in film. Here is how you would use notation in music, and here is how you would use interactivity in video games.
Yeah.
That's more so kind of what I'm like saying or whatnot.
Yeah, I get it. So it's especially true with like a lot of like like would you say it's also like true with like a lot of like skill-based games, you know, like, or ones that like require more? I mean, I don't know. I'm just coming up with some stuff off the top.
Right.
Yeah, but like, you know, how like the skill you accumulate over time, or, you know, from like playing over and over again, that kind of ties into that sense of interaction, sort of.
Oh, it can.
Yeah.
It definitely can.
Yeah.
You can use that as you can use that to work with as part of the game.
Yeah.
It's kind of all about realizing the tools of your medium and how to apply them. Like in film or whatnot, I sound like a broken record, but like in film or whatnot, you're very aware of what tools you have. Like, you have like different camera angles or whatnot, and those can convey different meanings or whatnot. You can do like a wide shot to impart loneliness. You can do a close-up for more intense stuff. How do you use establishing shots and like yada yada yada. Like you are, like you have the tools of your craft. With video games or whatnot, it's more like whether or not like having like how you handle like skill or whatnot and whatnot. Like that's a tool. That's a tool you can use. And basically like with whether or not you use lives or not. Do you have a time limit or do you not? What kind of game are you trying to do versus what are you trying to do with it? It's basically ultimately like a lot of games or whatnot are kind of inceptualized. For lack of a better term, my brain is fried. But a lot of the like foundation for a lot of games is, oh, I like this kind of game, I'm going to make this kind of game. Like, oh, I really like linear NES style 2D platformer, so I'm going to make a linear NES style 2D platformer. But that's not really the best way to make a game. It's like a better way to make a game is really like trying to figure out like, okay, what do I want to do? Like, what kind of experience do I want to give the player? And then meanwhile, genre and how you structure the game and what kind of level design you use, those are the tools in which you form that experience.
Ah, yes. Yeah. Yeah, it's important to keep in mind when it comes to, like, you know, when going into game development, like, you know, figuring out what type of game you would like to make. So my second question I have prepared is, some of the specific games you made, one of them is the commercially released Jack Razor, and the other one is the non-for-profit fan game Pac-Man World Spooky's Revenge. With these specific games, what desired you to make them? Like, what did you want? Like, what made you want to make these specific games? So to speak.
It kind of Jack Razor falls in a very interesting place in the prior point I just made. Because idea started. How it started was I wanted to play I wanted more. I love Turrican. Like, Turrican is one of my favorite video game series, and I wanted to play more of it. So then I just wanted to make basically a Turrican game, but add like my own flair to it, and I looked at other games or whatnot and what I thought would mesh well with it. However, as I was working on it, because like with Jack Razor's development, I was very, very foolish in terms of like, okay, I've been using GameMaker for a few years. I'm going to do something way more ambitious with it than I've ever made before. I'm not going to look up tutorials. No, I'm not going to look up anything. I don't need to look up anything. Like, I went in way too pompous. So that game ended up having a really long development. But as I was like working on it for like those 6 years of my life, it became like an interesting exercise because through that I eventually evolved it into something more than what it started. Because when I started, it was like, okay, you're just you have like a Euro platformer or whatnot, you have like a shop system, and you have like these additional optional moves that like increase the scope of how much you can explore and whatnot. But eventually, and like I wanted it to be story driven or whatnot, but as I was like diving into like what story decisions I made, because the story was pretty unworkable through most of development.
Oh.
Because I was like I was like bashing my head on a wall for this basically, where like I wrote a story and I built the levels to fit with that story, and it was a kind of story that needed a first act, but because it was a platformer and a more action-heavy game, you can't have that. You need to start when the action starts, and that's Act 2. So, like, it required like all this in order for like some of these plot points to work. You needed to get to know the characters more. It just wasn't gelling, and eventually, like, I was like having to ask myself, why did I pick these plot decisions? Like, why did this resonate with me? And it was upon asking myself that question where I was able to move the experience forward and make it something more. So the game, as you know, but for the sake of the recording and whatnot, I might as well go into it. Like, the story was basically, he plays a teenage boy, Jack, and he gets caught in this whole scenario of this mad scientist who is like locked away in a distant dimension, as the title suggests. He returns and with a giant fleet of cruisers and robots and the works. He blasts the ground. Jack absorbs it, and he gains the ability to shoot from his hands and whatnot. And effectively, and the reason why I wanted to do like that sort of thing is because I wanted to have like fun interactivity or whatnot, or like room for mechanics, while also having it be like something more instantly identifiable and easier for people to relate to, so I can handle more heavier story beats. If I had been like, oh, I'll have like a roller skating banana, it wouldn't have worked. But basically, so Jack ends up being recruited by this military organization who's trying to put a stop to the scientist trying to unleash this ultimate weapon or whatnot. So it sounds like a pretty video gamey plot. And what was ultimately the thing that really catalyzed it evolving was, so like one of the plot points was that while Jack is away, his parents get killed. But at first it just didn't work. I tried doing like a refusal to call sort of thing, if you're familiar with the hero's journey.
Oh yeah.
But it just wasn't gelling with the rest of the plot. And through one simple tweak, like, okay, I'll make him a runaway. Because like throughout a lot of it, like I kept having to make all these really weak justifications as to why Jack didn't want them. And it just wasn't working. But like having him be a runaway, like that worked. And it was from there when I tweaked the story, just that one tweak where I realized what I could do to the game to make it more impactful. So throughout the game, you alternate between the city in which he lives and the distant dimension, which is like more like in the city, everything is rooted by gravity. If nothing is floating or whatnot, everything is supported by gravity. Everything is like either held up or is supported by something. Whereas in the distant dimension, you have like floating platforms galore, and like it's more implausible and that sort of thing. And so like you have Jack running away from domestic problems at home with his family or whatnot, and then escaping into effectively this video game plot. And while he's like indulging in this escapism, his problems don't get solved; they get worse. And then he can't do anything about it. It's already too late.
Oh yeah, that's very meta if you think about it, actually.
Yeah. So, like, the game is a cautionary tale about it's a cautionary tale about indulging in escapism.
Yeah.
Like, if you have problems or whatnot, like for instance, like this pretty much this very subconsciously, I wasn't even trying to aim for this, but this very subconsciously was very rooted in what I was going through at the time, because probably pretty obvious by now, I'm trans, and as part of that, my parents weren't exactly very accepting of that, and that was really hard on me. So what did I do to cope or whatnot? I just indulged in playing video games or whatnot. I escaped from my problems, but the problems always caught back up with me. They always kept haunting me, and I was only left with regret as to, like, I should have, like, taken more steps earlier on to, like, set things into motion and fix my problems instead of just ignoring them. And so, like, that game is very reflective of that, because that's effectively the moral. Like, and I'm using not just the writing, but also, like, the presentation and the, like, how, like, the gameplay is framed and so on. I'm using those things to complement that and help get that across. It's not going to win an award for ludonarrative synchronicity, but, like, it was also a project that I started while I was leaving high school, so...
Yeah. But that's very fascinating, though. Like, you know, those little details, you know, it adds a lot more of, like, an emotional, you know, value to the story when you mention that. Yeah.
And, like, it isn't just the writing carrying it, because, like, the player is, like, playing it and is, like, experiencing it with the character.
Yeah.
Or whatnot. And that's one of the things I find so powerful about the medium, is that you can, like, they say experience is the best teacher, but, like, with this medium, we create those experiences. We, like, are able to create those experiences that inform our perceptions and what we take away in life. And, like, yes, you see that sort of thing in movies, too, or whatnot, done very well, but ultimately what I want to do with video games is translate that same thing there, because that could be way more powerful.
Yeah, because you're right in the experience. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. And also, further on, also stuff like, you know, music and, you know, the
Yes.
color palette play into that factor. Like you mentioned in the, you know, part in Jack Razor where, you know, where his parents are killed, you know, the level leading up to that, you know, the music is much more dramatic and, you know, you know, worrisome, ominous, yeah.
Like, it's not quite invoking Dies Irae, but it's pretty close.
Yeah. So, what about Pac-Man World Spooky's Revenge?
Also, like, a pretty similar impulse. Like, basically at that point, like, I'm a huge fan of the Pac-Man World games, and, like, I wanted to, and for, like, quite a long time, like, there was a long time where we didn't get any, and they didn't really try much like it, so that was kind of a project born out of frustration.
Yeah.
And from there, basically, I tried to, like, because I'm very narratively driven, I decided to, like, okay, I wanted this to be a direct follow-up to World 2. So, like, let me look back at the story of World 2 and try to work off of that and see what I have here. It's like, and as I was analyzing World 2's story, I noticed, like, it doesn't necessarily have so much of a story as much as a setup and plot elements.
Right.
So I decided to, like, take those elements and try to construct the story out of them. And as part of that, it's like, okay, let me dive more into, like, the backstory they established at the beginning. Let me try to get an understanding of, like, why Spooky is doing what he's doing or whatnot. And that led me into, like, and, like, I was just trying to find, like, the most natural way to do that. and in doing so, it led me down very interesting and kind of dark places, and I'm just like, this is cool.
Yeah.
So, like, it led into all these themes of, like, history is written by the winners, how, like, the heroes of one society could be, like, monsters to another, and, like, how, like, things can get warped through the ages, and, like, how to handle that in the present. And, like, I'm just like, I did not expect to get into this territory, but I'm liking this territory, so I just rolled with it.
It's very fascinating. Yeah.
So, like, only the first demo is out now, but by the end of the game, you're going to see it take some very interesting turns.
Oh yeah, I bet it's gonna be quite crazy. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I already know, like, that the first demo ended off with the appearance of a certain character.
Yes.
Yeah, and which is very interesting. I know you're also gonna, like, be adding, like, a lot of, like, cool little fan servicey stuff too, that works in service with the game, of course. Yeah.
It has to.
Yeah,
like,
it has
of
to.
Course, I'm a fan. I'm going to throw in stuff that amuses me and whatnot, but, like, you can't overdo it and you can't rely on it.
Right.
It's the sprinkles you put on top.
Yeah,
not
it's kind of like, it was kind of the issue with, like, a lot of modern Sonic games, because of how much, like, I mean, they give story justification a lot of the times, like in the case with the upcoming Frontiers. They're kind of like, the cyberspace levels are just older levels, but, like, mismatched with, like, a level design. And,
like, ultimately, it was also thinking about, like, how to iterate off of the prior games, like, what are their strengths, what are their weaknesses, and, like, how can I move things forward. And, like, I really had to, like, try to put myself into, like, the space of, like, alright, what made these work? And I also, as part of that, I was, like, looking into their influences, and, like, the lead designer of Pac-Man World 1, which just got a very good remake,
yeah.
but, he was very inspired by Disneyland. And basically Pac-Man World 1 is basically Pac-Man Goes to Disneyland. Like, so much is rooted in that. And I'm like, excellent, this is a pool I can dig from, because, like, I'm also a huge, theme park fanatic. So, like, I thought, like, an interesting way to take it is, like, okay, so, like, you have, like, the first game, which takes place on Ghost Island, and you have the second game, which takes place on Pac-Land. Here I want it to be basically the world outside of those two places, and from there I kind of drew influence from mostly, like, Disney theme parks, but mostly Disney theme parks that are not Disneyland. Like, I was looking at Tokyo Disney Sea, I was looking at like, I was looking all over the shop. And of course I was, like, drawing through my own experiences, and which was really handy, because, like, what kind of feelings do I want to invoke in this environment or whatnot? That's easy. I've been there. Like,
Yeah.
these are environments in which I have inhabited, so it's way easier to do that.
Yeah.
And so, like, I came from, like, getting into the headspace of past developers who worked on the series, trying to figure out, like, how to, like, tweak things, how can I translate it into 2D, like, how do I construct an experience where all these things fit together, how do I get the game and the story to, like, move, like just gel together, how do I get the game to, like, invoke some of these feelings and, like, whatnot. Like, it's, like, it's kind of like this big jigsaw puzzle. Like, it's all about, like, trying to figure out how these things go together and making them all fit. And, like, frankly, it came together pretty nicely, in that sense. Like, it wasn't as much of a crapshoot as Jack Razor 1 was. But yeah, like, both Jack Razor 1 and Pac-Man World Spooky's Revenge are games that were conceptualized as, I want to play this. Let me make a game I want to play. Whereas, like, some of the other games that I have either started development on or am in the planning phases of are games that are more so kind of developed with the mindset of, like, okay, I want to say this, or I want to make the player feel this. I want the player to have, like, this journey or whatnot. And what gameplay elements can I use to aid in that? So, like, that's also the frustrating part of game development. It's long, especially if you're doing it by yourself.
Yeah.
And it's very, and when you're, like, doing one project for so long, it ends up, you end up always thinking about, like, what am I going to do next? What am I going to do next? So, like, you're evolving faster than what you're making.
Yeah, that can be a bit of a problem, especially if you, like, plan out things a whole lot, like you have this, like, whole lineup in your head, like, for a series, like, you plan out, how, like, a sequel would develop, or how sequels would develop on the initial concept, that kind of gets overwhelming. Yeah.
But that's also part of why I personally don't get too caught up on the idea of making sequels. But, like, that's not to say that I won't. I'm working on one right now.
Yeah.
Well, not Pac-Man World. Yes, that also counts. But it's a sequel to a game I didn't make.
And like another fan game? Or...
no, Pac-Man World Spooky's Revenge is a sequel to a game I did not make.
Oh, okay.
That's a fan game. But I am working on another sequel to a game I did make.
Oh, okay.
There is where, like, it's not going to be, like, one-to-one, like, oh, it's like the original, but bigger and better and, like, whatnot. Like, I wanted to do something, and, like, I thought of gameplay elements of how to do it, and just so happens this prior game I made already has, like, distinct similarities, so it was, like, a pretty, like, it was a structural evolution of the, like, so, like, but, like, it fit, and it's working out pretty nicely. So I'm looking forward to get that out there. In fact, development on that started before Pac-Man World Spooky's Revenge, or at least the current build of it.
Oh, okay.
In fact, a lot of the code in Pac-Man World Spooky's Revenge is modified code from this other game.
Really? That's interesting. Yeah. So they're basically like brother and sister, or sister and sister. Well, not quite.
Gameplay-wise, they are very different.
Right. They're cousins.
But, like, I ended up making my code very versatile, so I took advantage of that.
That's very resourceful.
Yeah.
Very resourceful. Yeah. I think you showed gameplay of it in one of your videos.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah. It's Jack Razor 2, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, I noticed.
I've done more games than Jack Razor 1, but none that were commercial released.
Right,
so,
yeah.
like, I thought I was being more vague.
Yeah, I noticed a lot of the gameplay in that. Kind of like you had like the wall jump and whatnot. It's kind of like Mega Man X sort of type of.
Yes, like there is a Mega Man X style wall jump because like it's an exploration-driven platformer. So like I wanted to include like more mechanical versatility to aid in the exploration, give more ways to explore, and that just felt like a very natural thing to do. But ultimately, the big thing with Jack Razor 2 is that this is a story ultimately about, I don't want to give away too much, but like helping people versus like helping yourself is kind of a crucial theme in a way. Again, I don't want to go into too much, but like ultimately the game adopts more of a collectathon, like 6th gen, like Mario, like 5th and 6th gen Mario 64 sunshine, like that sort of thing. And a lot of the objectives that you're given or whatnot aid in that theme in one way or another.
Oh, okay. You don't see 2D collectathons very much. I mean, you have Metroidvanias, which are, like, close to collectathons in some ways, but, like, they're not, like, you know, it's different. It's kind of different, you know.
Yeah. This is taking kind of like the foundation laid by the original and evolving it into this 2D collectathon, and as such, the level design philosophy had to complement that. I couldn't just build stages like I would in the original. There was like a difference in how you do it. A lot of it comes down to like knowing what tools you're working with, and just trying to make the best choice you can.
Yeah. Yeah, okay, so, my third question, I think you kind of answered a whole lot of it, but what it is, what are some inspirations for your work? As in, do you take any specific inspirations from certain cultures, other pieces of media, other games, etc., etc.? So you mentioned stuff like, you know, film, you know, as an inspiration for, like, how you do things, you mentioned, like, a couple of other games you took inspiration from, like, you know, for Jack Razor, it's a Turrican-inspired affair, whatnot.
Yeah.
Yeah, but, like, what other inspirations, aside from those, would you say you've sort of taken inspiration, you know, from?
Basically, any game I play that I think is even remotely interesting. Especially games that aren't 100% good.
Oh, yeah.
Or like a game where it's like, oh, this is a really good idea, but they could have done it like this, or like,
yeah, I know.
They had race.
What game would you use as an example for that?
Well, Sonic 06 is pretty good. No, like seriously, of course, if the game is very unfinished, the presentation is really off-putting or whatnot, with like the under-textured, like proportional humans and like whatnot. In time, the game does really interesting things, and it's like, whoa, if this was programmed better, or like if they had more time in the oven, like this would have been amazing. And now we have fan-made projects like PO6, essentially, like that was an influence behind Jack Razor 1, actually. Like, you know how you like things like the shop where you buy things like I forget what it's called, with like the sky gem where you throw it and you end up like, I was like thinking about like, that is such a cool idea. Like, what if these levels were actually designed with that in mind? That was the impetus of like, okay, like I'll introduce these optional moves that like these levels are also built around, and like that was it. It was Turrican mixed with Sonic 06.
Yeah, but yeah, the Sonic 06 had like a lot of interesting ideas. That
it also has an amazing soundtrack.
Like, the soundtrack. It's a great soundtrack. But like, do you take inspiration from any like specific cultures as well? Like, would you say you're European, sort of, or?
Well, some of them. Like, the thing is, I don't really look at it in terms of that as much. Whereas, my consumption of media is pretty broad. At least the scope of it is. I don't really funnel myself too much down in one direction. Like, of course, I was like talking about like Commodore Amiga games, and which are a big influence in my work, because like that's a library I just find so interesting, and. Yes, like you do have like the European stuff, but literally like right next to me is like a collection of like Ranma 1/2 manga and VHS tapes. I consume like Japanese media too. I also like consume a lot of American media, and like whatnot. So I kind of go about things by like, this looks interesting. I want to play it, right? I want to watch it, or like whatever. like one of the most helpful things I think is like I kind of anything I like can be an inspiration one way or another. So like you could like look like so much like even like my experiences in the world around me, those inspire me. It's kind of like, or like whether that be good or bad, or like even like reading the news, like basically I get inspired by literally everything in the world around me. And like, oh, here's something I could do for a game, or here's something I can incorporate into this, or like that, or like it's like all like, yeah, it's like very broad.
Nice, yes. Anyways, so for the next question, we know we kind of talked about the Pac-Man World Spooky's Revenge, your development process with that a little bit, but I would like to ask, from beginning to where it's currently at, how did the development of Pac-Man World Spooky's Revenge evolve, and where would you say it's currently at?
Well, like, the idea started off in 2015. Though, like, at that point, the major reason was, like, oh, I got a new computer, I can finally use Unity, let me try to make a 3D game or whatnot. And it was, like, it was more complicated than I thought it was going to be. And meanwhile, I was already, like, neck deep into Jack Razor. That game was still, like, 3 years away. So, I was getting ahead of myself. So that ended up not really going anywhere. But I still wanted to make a Pac-Man World fan game, mostly because it was an interesting programming experiment, because like I got to like try to recreate these other mechanics in like this or whatnot. Like I could try to like make it feel as one-to-one with the prior stuff as possible. So like it was an interesting and honestly important experiment in that respect. But ultimately, even like around the time I like finished Jack Razor and could put more development energy into it, the vision for it remained the same pretty much. I kind of just got a better idea of how to do it. And like, of course, with the prior build, I was trying to figure out how to program in these mechanics. But like, I like was playing it again, like I feel like I could do this better, so I started from scratch. Or I scrapped the prior build and then just took some of the code I had written for Jack Razor 2, and then like just tweaked it or whatnot to like add in different mechanics, remove these mechanics, add these mechanics in, use the code from this mechanic in this other game into like being more like this, and etc. But like ultimately I was just trying to go for the same thing, but I think my craft had improved in between dropping off of it initially and then picking it back up again later.
I see. Yeah, that's quite the evolution, I'd say. Yeah, the current demo that I played, it was really fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. One thing I like to do was to like bounce on from one enemy to one enemy and like just basically like go like really high into the sky. That was really fun. Like use that as like a platforming tool to. I think I mentioned that before when we talked before. Yeah. But anyways, on the subject of projects you've worked on and are working on, how about the ones that didn't make it that far? Have you had any projects that you ended up scrapping, or ones that never got past the drawing board?
Oh yeah, oh yes. Especially earlier on, because like you have like dumb kid me who by evidence of how Jack Razor 1 started, was way too ambitious with certain things, where it's like, oh, I want to make a first-person shooter, I want to, then I, like, find, like, this, Wolfenstein 3D, like, engine or whatnot. I'm like, cool, now I'm going to add onto it, I'm going to add elevation, I'm going to do all this other stuff, and, like, it didn't of course you would like walk up a slope and you'd fall right through it. So like, it didn't work. I had to scrap that. And like, of course, when I was working on Jack Razor 1, because that was such a time-consuming project, I had other ones like I had planned. Like I had this one idea for like an overhead, like shooter or whatnot, kind of like a twin stick sort of thing.
Oh.
But it didn't like. But like, yeah, like I didn't really have the time to start it or develop anything further than that. Who knows? Like if I find like something more interesting or whatnot to do with it, I might revisit it. Or it's like, okay, here's something I want to do, but what would be a good fit for this? Oh, this would be a good fit for this. Sweet, I'll use that as the foundation and like work off of that so it can do this. Yeah.
Yeah, some ideas just don't end up working out for like one reason or another. Yeah, yeah, it definitely happens. I've had like several videos I've started to work on, but just didn't get past the scripting phase. Yeah, and there's one video some videos that have just been in like production hell for a while that I still intend on getting out, but you know, anyways,
yeah, I don't like. I mean, with video games at least, with videos on video games, it's a little different because you can like run into a brick wall and it's like, oh, I'll do a video on this. Darn, I don't have anything that interesting to say about it.
Yeah.
Whatnot. But like video games or whatnot, like I feel like, okay, like I'm not getting rid of these ideas. I'm not never using them. I'm just tucking them away into a drawer or something, and I'll pull them out.
Yeah. I noticed that's also kind of like the process with a lot of like certain like Nintendo games that don't end up like Metroid Dread, for example. That was in development. That started development on the DS and then didn't come out until the Switch. And then you know, Star Fox Zero reused concepts from Star Fox 2, whatnot. And on the subject of, I'm not sure if any of if there's been any Pac-Man game that's like reused ideas that were scrapped from like an earlier project. I don't think there has. Well, I know. I know your fan game has reused ideas that were scrapped from the World Trilogy.
Yeah.
But
also, like you have the case of World 3 using stuff from Pac-Man Adventures.
Oh yeah, that's right. How did I not think of that? Yeah. Yeah. Anyways, so the next question. Game development can be difficult, especially if you're an indie developer, but being an indie dev can also have its benefits. What would you say are the pros and cons of being an independent game developer?
Well, pros and cons. So the pros are, like, no one's telling you what to make. You have a lot more freedom and less oversight. Part of the problem with that is, like, sometimes some oversight can help keep you on course. And it can be hard to have, resources to do certain things. And also, but, you have a lot more room to be creative in the indie market, but, the indie market right now, or for the past, several years, is so flooded that, you can't do it with the expectation of, oh, I'm going to make this game, I'm going to be a millionaire, I'm going to make all of the money, and I will be able to leave the house. Yeah, take that, Mom! Most indie games bomb. And, it's very hard to get noticed, and, a lot of it is like a lot of people are very focused not on like, oh, this gameplay looks really fun, but like at initial glance anyway, like, oh, like the graphics, like they need to be like the like best pixel art I've ever seen, or else like death and pestilence upon ye. Like,
yeah.
Like, ridiculous. Like, I saw this one indie game or whatnot that came from an independent studio, not a like or whatnot. And and they had amazing pixel art, and it was $20. Your game is $5, and you're one person, and therefore your graphics need to be half as good. It makes no sense.
It needs to look like dust. It needs to look. It needs to look like dust and Elysian Tail.
Yeah, like, it's ridiculous. I'm sorry, you can bleep that out.
Oh yeah, I can bleep that out. Yeah.
It's ridiculous. I've been trying not to swear, but like it's ridiculous. It's super frustrating.
Yeah, no, definitely. Like the people who are like making these like comparisons and whatnot, you know, like.
And it's also really frustrating too in regard to like yeah, like it's like, just like sometimes like expectations are like really far out there, and it's like, yeah, you just like it's unsustainable, like, and it's not like I was kind of one of the lucky ones in the sense that Jack Razor did end up making money, not much, but it made a profit.
Nice.
But like most indie games don't. And like even then it wasn't like the biggest profit in the world. It was more like, cool, I can treat myself to lunch a few times.
Yeah.
But yeah, like it's like I think also like so much of the indie market is based on undervaluing your own work. Because, like, part of the reason I think, this is just my own theorizing, but a lot of, like, indie games taking off, especially during the 7th generation or whatnot, like, you had, like, on the Wii, you had, like, Wii Virtual Console and WiiWare and whatnot, and you had, like, Xbox Live Arcade where, like, you had, like, indie games packaged together or whatnot, or side-by-side with older games. And I think that was, like, in hindsight, not the best, because it kind of framed this idea of like, oh, these new games that people spent like a lot of time and effort on are like comparable in price range to these games that these companies are really just pulling out of the shed, throwing in an emulator and sending out there for a quick buck. But because like a lot of these were similar experiences or whatnot, like it made sense from the consumer angle, but like not from a development angle or a resource angle. And it, like, so like it was funny. Like Jack Razor, as like you know, was like $8. And meanwhile, as I was like compiling the soundtrack album, I noticed that like, wait a minute, if I did the typical thing and posted this soundtrack album for $10, the album would be more expensive than the game.
Oh.
This component on its own has more value than the game collectively. And that was like, that was a punch to the gut.
Ouch, yeah.
That was such a frustrating revelation. So like I really feel like so much of indie development is like undervaluing your own work. And like, but like you're expected to like paint the Mona Lisa and sell it for a dime. Like it's completely bananas when you actually think of the practicality and sustainability of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, like indie games, like it's fun to make games, assuming that you're not running into bug after bug after bug. Like it's fun, it's freeing, it's great to get your creative juices out there, and it's great to do if like you really have a passion for it. But if you're doing this to make money, don't.
Please don't. Yeah, just right. only do it if you want to, like, you know, create. You know, if you just want to.
Exactly.
Yeah, if you want to make something you want to play.
Audience.
Yeah.
You're your audience. Like, if you like make these games because you want to play them, and like profits or whatnot, or money or whatever, like that would be a theoretical positive, like fluke, or like cool, like this is a fringe benefit. The key is I made this thing and I like it. Like that, like it's to anyone thinking about being an indie developer, I think that really needs to be something you think about beforehand.
Yeah.
That's not to say don't do it, but like think about why you're doing it.
Yeah.
Because like you don't want to end up broke and like curled up in bed in fetal position crying for an hour.
Right. Yeah. Not a fun experience.
No.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Nope.
No one wants to go through that.
No, nobody does.
But like, meanwhile, like it's like if you want to say like if you want like, oh, this would be a really good idea for a video game. I want to make this. Cool, I made it. Hey guys, look, I made this. Or what do you think, or whatnot? Like that, I think would be a good reason to get into game development.
Yes.
Personally, for me, part of it was also like I want to make other people feel things. I want to like touch them in ways that like I've been touched by media and whatnot. Which is why a lot of my games, I think, like take more serious story directions. So like that was ultimately I think not having like I think in times or whatnot where my games haven't had as far of a reach as I wanted or whatnot, I think that's what hurt me more. But ultimately I think that's also kind of the motivation to keep going. It's always you know, what might, you know, seem like a setback could, you know, be a good motivation to try harder, you know. Yeah. Or, like, try differently, or, Jack Razor 1 is still the hardest I've ever worked in my life. Like, I've made better stuff since then, but, like, that was still, like, the most effort I put into anything. So... anyways, now for my next question. Now you also run a channel called YouTube channel called Factor5Fanatic, where you mostly do analytical game-related videos, like game reviews and video essays. How would you say that your experience as a game developer affect the type of videos you make? And also, has there been anything you've learned from doing your game analyses on YouTube? I don't know if that's a word, game analyses, but analyses, yeah. But yeah, have you learned anything from doing your game analyses on YouTube that has gone into how you evaluate game design and how you apply it to your own projects? It's mostly been the reverse. Where like a lot of my analytical framework for other games is driven by my own experiences making the games. Or basically just like taking certain things and just like this is something I know something about or whatnot, and here is like basically I've always, or not always, but through a lot of my current channel anyway, like these reviews were kind of like a thought exercise, and were something. Actually, you know what? No, I take it back. So like these were a thought exercise in trying to get into how other games work or whatnot, and applying my knowledge from game design into them, and seeing like what works and what doesn't and whatnot. But yeah, no, like actually thinking about it, no, I have like used that as an example and taken that back into my own work. Just not like directly, like, oh, you're writing about how this game is the funny, like, yes, that gives me the, like, that means I am better than the developers, and therefore, haha, I win. Like, no.
Yes. Yeah, you've also, though, your YouTube content, it isn't just video games. You've also talked about other things, like you've done reviews, you've done a retrospective on the Star Wars movies, and you've also done a video on transgender webcomics as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
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 Well, like, the webcomic one, that was... I was thinking, like, okay, like, I thought of the idea, like, in the middle of, like, Pride Month or whatnot. It's like, okay, like, I'll have this be, like, a late Pride Month video. I'll make a joke of it at the beginning. And then but, like, also it was, like, the other motivating factor is I'm pooped from the last video. It makes it easier.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, like, the Star Wars ones, you definitely can see, like, my, narrative fixations come into play there, and, like, analyzing narrative, and also, like, hear me complaining about editing choices, and, like, talking about, like, certain things like that. So, like, yeah, like... And you're probably going to see more of that, truth be told.
Yeah. Yes.
Like, I like more than just video games, but, like, because so much of what I do either is applicable to or, like, involves them in some way, like, yeah, like, of course that's going to be most of what I talk about.
Yeah.
On the channel.
Yes. So, this also leads into the next question, but I think we already kind of talked about it a little bit. But yeah, yeah, but in your transgender webcomics video, you mentioned how we tell stories to pass on information. Now, do you feel that that can also somewhat be applied to video games? And in what ways would it apply? And also, okay. And also, okay, well, I'll ask next.
Go on.
Well, I was gonna add on. And also, what would you say about the importance of story in video games? But, like, answer the first few parts of that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so is that applicable to video games? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that also ties into what I was saying earlier with, like, experience is the best teacher and crafting experiences for the player, and that can be, like, a great way to, like, share our, like, life experiences, whether, like, literal or thrown in some more abstract context or whatever. But as far as, like, the importance of story in video games, the kind of funny thing about story in video games is stories benefit from structure, and like they progress very linearly. Or at least most of the time. You have, like, some narratives that, like, kind of cut back and forth between different time periods, like I mentioned Citizen Kane earlier, and, like, that's a retrospective on someone's life after the fact, and, like, talking to people and getting more insight into it, so it goes back and forth. But even there, it's presented in a linear fashion. Like, one scene, you have one scene, then you have another scene, then you have another scene. With video games, the player is in direct control, so that, and, like, you can't ignore that. You can streamline things in certain ways and, like, think about how to, like, okay, where do I loosen things up more? Where do I funnel the player? How do I get that to feel naturally? Like, ultimately, like, so, like, that's one thing that makes story in games pretty tricky. But you can do it, and it can lead to great results. What I feel you can do even more, and I think might be, like a more, like, simple, but, like, is to, like, think about, like, the experience and, like, what you want the takeaway to be, and how to get that across through gameplay. It doesn't necessarily need to be through a story, but more so, like, an experience that, like, shares a piece of information. Like, what emotions do you want the player to feel? How do you get them to feel that? like one idea I've had for a game, but I've never trusted myself to do it because it's like it requires way more knowledge and experience than I have in my life. Is I really like I've had this idea for a game for a while where like if the game when you start it up, the game automatically just decides like factors or whatnot, like okay, you're white, you're black, you're Asian, or you're straight, you're gay, you're trans, you come from a rich family, you come from a poor family, you have all these variables like randomized. And you effectively just try to live that life as long as you can. And like the factors that come into play in each of those lives, come into play. And like I was like, this would be a really good use of the medium. This would be a really good way to get across empathy for like other people and like other groups of people or whatnot. Because like you're literally like living through their experiences. But at the same time, because of the broad scope, I do not trust myself to make that game.
yeah. It's an interesting concept, but very, but also it seemed like it would be very challenging to approach. You know.
Yes. The ideal thing to do would to get like a bunch of people from a bunch of different backgrounds to work on the game.
Yeah.
And structure it, but like that's really hard to do when you're just one person. And you can't see anyone.
Right.
Therein lies the fundamental, like, issue with independent game development. It's like, oh, cool. Like, I want to do this. Wait, this involves other people. Right. Okay, I'm not going to do it because I can't pay them.
Yeah, this is... Yeah. So, now, last question. Of your time in game development, what would you say your favorite moment of it was, or favorite moments would be?
Favorite moments of game development. I feel like the most sad... I don't think this comes at any one time. But I love those moments in game development where, like, you're not sure if something's going to click together, and then it clicks way harder than you were expecting, and it's like, whoa, I made that? Like, those moments. I cherish those moments. Again, that's a pretty vague and broad thing, but yeah.
Yeah, I could definitely see that, you know, because that, you know, that ability to just, you know, make something and, you know, then you look at, you know, you're, like, really impressed with it, and, you know, it's not exactly comparable, but, like, I'm not exactly, like, the best artist or anything, but I've done art. I've had intentions to do more art, you know, whatnot. But whenever I like make a piece that I'm really satisfied with, I'm like, hey, I made that, you know.
Yeah.
Hey, look at this art I made. Yeah.
I've had my own. I've had my own ups and downs with trying to be a better artist.
Yeah. Yes. But yes, that is the interview. And all right. But yeah, this was very fun to do. It was really nice conducting this interview with you, Luna Morely. Yes.
I'm happy to be here.
Hey, anytime. But anyways, I think that'll wrap up this interview for now. Anyways.